Welcome back. This is your host, Kristi Slaughter, on SuperTalk Saturday Morning, WFHG 92.9. I'm joined with my special guest, Hannah Martin. She is with Heart Moss Pottery. Good morning, Hannah.
Good morning.
Thanks for making the drive in. You're actually in the studio with us. Thank you for going through all the rain.
I'm very excited to be here. Such an honor.
Now, you're located in Elk Creek, Virginia, near Independence.
Yes, that is in Grayson County, Virginia, so kind of middle of nowhere, which is exactly where we want to be.
I've only been to Independence a couple times. I think it was maybe for a 4-H competition or band, maybe a band festival or something like that.
It's a lovely little town. I think one of my favorite things about it is the fact that it is so small, but yet it is still a county seat. It has less people. I was in the Navy for quite a while, and it has less people on board than my first ship. And so I kind of look at it and go, oh yes, this is a lovely little town. Everybody knows everybody, and I love it.
Now, you're originally from...
I'm from a lot of places. Okay. I generally tend to say I'm from Oregon. I was born in Washington State, moved around a lot when I was a child, and then I was in the military. But after the military, I settled in Portland, Oregon for several years before then moving to Brooklyn. I met my spouse in Brooklyn, and then we moved here after that. So it was a little bit of a culture shock. It was a good one.
A little bit, I would say. A little bit. So what made you choose this area to be in?
My wife's family bought property in Grayson County decades ago now. And so she's spent her childhood every summer. They go to Grayson, they go to the farm and play in the creek, and she really loved it. And the family asked us to caretake the land for a summer. And so we came here and said, why would we ever leave?
Oh, it is beautiful, isn't it? It is. rain and all.
Well, it's beautiful. There's lots of beautiful places, but what we decided is that we could never replicate the community and the people that we met and the people that we kind of created bonds with over the course of those 6 months. We could never find that anywhere else. Why would we go anywhere else?
We are talking about Heart Moss Pottery today.
Yes.
When I looked at your website, you also have a farm, and you mentioned that the rain's going to be great for the farm, so we are grateful. So I want you to talk to me a little bit about how Heart Moss Pottery started and why you're passionate about what you're doing. I've not got to see any of the pieces in person yet. I'm hoping maybe I can today. There looks like there's a little bag here that we're going to open here in a few minutes. But I have seen your pottery online. It's absolutely beautiful, breathtaking. How did that begin?
It began not that long ago. It's only been a couple of years. I think this October will be my fifth year anniversary of making pottery. And it started, my wife made pottery for years before I did. She actually ran the Galax Pottery Studio with Chestnut Creek School of the Arts for a short time. And she said, you've got to try this. You're going to really love it. And I said, I have too many hobbies already. I just don't think so. And finally she got me into the studio one day, and I threw my first bowl, and that I was hooked. It was magical. It's just kind of sitting there at the wheel, and kind of, it's kind of like a dance almost, and with the motion and the rhythm of the wheel, and having your hands in clay and being allowed to get dirty and all of that. And I said, okay, I've got to do this some more. And so then I just began practicing in earnest, and that has led to today.
So if people aren't familiar with how long it takes during that process, how does it begin? I've never done anything like that. I've went to a place and painted some pottery before, and I guess they put it in the kiln. And then I was thinking back when I was preparing for the show, I remember being a kid and opening one of those little I don't know if it's Black & Decker. That's the only word I can think of from like the early 90s, late 80s, well, early 90s, late 80s. I'm not that old, but one of those little battery operated pottery wheels.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, it goes real slow and doesn't really do anything, I'm sure, except make you think that you're like a real potter.
Yeah. That's the Fisher-Price, first pottery wheel.
Okay, I never got past that. I would like to know where it is. It's probably at home because we never throw anything away. I'm sure it didn't go in a yard sale, but that's all the experience I have. So talk to us about how the process works.
From beginning to end, basically I take raw clay that I purchase from Highwater Clays, which they mine their clay in the mountains of North Carolina. It's just a few hours from where I live, which is great. And I wedge the clay, and then I put the clay on the wheel, and I center it. So, and then I form the basic piece, and then I set it aside and let it sit and dry for a while. And then I take the piece and I put it upside down on the wheel, and I trim the bottom, and then I let it dry again. I like to say I just manage drying processes in the studio. I let it dry again, and then put it in the kiln for the first firing, for bisque firing, and that is fired up to 1828 degrees. Take it out, and by then it's kind of solid and I'm not going to accidentally break it by touching it. Then I glaze the piece, which is basically dipping it into a slurry of water and various chemicals, including silica, which is sand. Dip it in that, and then put it back in the kiln, fire it up to 2262 degrees, and then it is done. And so it takes, from beginning to end, including all the drying processes, it takes anywhere from 3 weeks to a month to make a standard piece. Bigger pieces take longer because the drying time is longer. I usually allow 6 weeks to 2 months to create one of my much larger bowls.
Now, as far as the different glazes are concerned, getting the colors that you want, because they're absolutely beautiful. There was this set of nesting bowl. I don't even know what you call it, but they're like little bowls and then another bowl. And nesting bowl is the only one I could
That's exactly right.
But how do you go about conceptualizing the design, the colors, and does it change the finished product, what you think it's going to be in your mind when you initially start?
Absolutely. And there has to be a little bit of flexibility. You have to be able to relax with pottery to a certain extent. It's never going to be what you visualize it's going to be. And I actually develop my own glazes, and so I get to work a lot with things like chemistry to create those glazes. And glazes are basically glass. So you take refined sand, which is silica. And if you've heard, the mythology of when lightning strikes on the beach, it creates this cool glass stuff. Well, it's true, and I'm basically taking that same process and managing it with other chemicals to create the colors. And so I spend a lot of time from January through April time doing glaze development and creating new colors. So this year I actually have 2 new color combinations that are new for the season that are all mine. So I'm very excited about that.
When I looked at your Facebook page and I also looked at your website, you're traveling all the time. It seems like you're going to different shows and festivals.
Everywhere. I just came back from Raleigh. Next weekend I'll be up in Roanoke. The furthest north I go is Chicago. I go to Chicago once a year, and I tend to go south to Tampa, Florida once a year. I try to go to Savannah once a year, Atlanta a couple times a year. I tend to choose places where I know people who will let me stay with them.
That's great. That's right.
It saves me money. And so I choose places to go to sell work in the big city, basically, because we really do live where there just are not a lot of people, and I am full time with my pottery business. This is our main source of income, and so I go to the cities where people are a little more willing to pay a little bit more money for a really nice piece of pottery.
They're used to paying more money for everything.
Exactly. So. And then I can take that money back to my local community and spend it at my farmer's market and hire the local handyman to do the work on the house, and I like to think of it as kind of the anti-Walmart effect, right? Bringing the money back to those local communities, to my local community specifically.
And you're on the road after the show today?
Yes, I am. I'm heading down to Roaring Gap for just an afternoon event at the Roaring Gap Club. Hopefully people will kind of notice the prettiness of my bowls and think about that as they have summer weddings and so on, and gift needs this summer. And we will see. It should be a fun time.
Something very unique that you could do, something special, one of a kind.
Yes, absolutely one of a kind, especially my bigger pieces. They are all very much individual.
And I want to talk to you a little bit about your farm when we come back. Is there any place local that people can see your pottery or purchase your pottery?
Absolutely. Hartwood in Abingdon. I have work there, and I have work up and down the Highway 81 corridor, as I like to put it. So in Radford, I'm at the Green Heron in Radford. I'm at the Artful Lawyer in Blacksburg, as far north as Virginia Made in Stanton, Virginia. So yes, there's a lot of places. I have them all listed on my website, which is heartmusspottery.com.
Who knows? Maybe we have some local businesses here that might like to feature some of your pottery. Right? That would be fun. Yes. I get excited when we have guests on the show, and then I'm out in the community and eating or working or shopping, and then I see people pass guest pieces of work, and I get really excited when I see them. I'm usually taking pictures and sharing them. We need to take a quick commercial break here in just a few minutes. Can you stay with us?
Absolutely.
Okay. We'll be back in just a moment. This is your host, Kristi Slaughter, on SuperTalk Saturday Mornings, WFHG 92.9. Good morning. This is your host, Kristi Slaughter, on SuperTalk Saturday Mornings, WFHG. We're back with my special guest, Hannah Martin. She is with Heart Moss Pottery in Elk Creek, Virginia. Thanks for staying with us, Hannah.
I'm pleased and honored to be here.
You've got an event that's coming up here in just a couple weeks.
Yes, I have an open studio. I have an annual open studio event where we open up the studio, actually clean it once a year. It's very important. And we also do farm tours on the same day. And in the studio, it's the one time a year that I sell all of my seconds. And seconds are pieces that are slightly flawed. They aren't perfect, but they still work great. And so I price them really cheap. And then that allows people who are a little more local to have access to nice pottery that isn't as costly.
As a child, I completely flashed back to this. There was a pottery business, I guess maybe in the Mountain City, and I remember going as a kid and they would sell just bags of the clay and we would get those. That's probably what I used on my Fisher-Price, my first pottery wheel. But there was a room and they had stacks of seconds.
Yes.
And that's where we got all of our pieces of pottery. We still use them today. My grandmother passed away and she passed down all of her things. And sometimes they would be like a personalized piece.
Yes.
And it would have a little name on it, or there would be one edge that maybe had a tiny little piece on it or a little bevel. And for me, I never thought of them as being second, something that would be less money or tossed. That was just the beauty in the piece, that it was just not quite perfect. And you knew that it was handmade.
And I will say that the piece that I brought you today is actually a second itself. And so you will see kind of what is probably the most common flaw. In the final firing, there's this one little thing that happens sometimes, and I say, I can't sell that for full price, which is great because then I get to give them away, or I get to.
That's right. Well, I love it. Well, I'm going to open it here in just a few minutes. I'm really excited about it. Now, why do some of those flaws occur? Let's just talk about that.
There are a lot of things that can happen. Most recently, I've been having a problem with the fact that I now throw so thin, my walls are so thin and delicate that long term the piece will kind of get a little bit oval instead of round. It'll kind of warp just a little bit in the heat. It is firing up well over 2,000 degrees, which is really, really hot. And so things will happen. Things will happen with clay shrinks. And so as it's shrinking, if there's one little bit of it that's a little thicker or a little thinner, as it's shrinking, it'll pull away from that thin spot and create a little crack right there. Those are very, very common. And so I try not to have those happen in the first place, but when they do, it's kind of like, oh, this is great. This can go to somebody else that I wouldn't have expected otherwise.
Now, when you're talking about throwing the pottery, the edge is really thin. Is that showing like your skill and how, I mean, I don't know a lot about the pottery world, but typically the thinner pieces, that there's a certain level of artistry that has to go with throwing that piece?
To a certain extent, yes. I mean, there's a balance there. You don't want to go so thin that the piece is just going to crumble when you touch it, right? But I do throw as thin as possible and still maintain the durability of the piece. And I'm actually considering moving into porcelain here in the next year, possibly during my Dark Ages time frame of January through April next year. I'll practice and see if I really want to make that commitment.
Well, any second pieces that you have to practice and you want to come back on the show, talk to us about that. You're welcome.
And so anyway, so yes, I do like to think that a lot of that has to do with skill, and I'm honored that I have that. I feel very lucky. I feel like I won the Potter's Lottery, that with practice I've been able to get to where I am now. And of course I look forward to how far I still have to go, how much more practice I need to do. I feel like pottery as a whole, there's this massive amount of knowledge and information and experience to make all the different kinds of pottery. And I know just a little sliver of that. And I look forward to kind of learning all the rest of it. I know my one little sliver really well, but I've never delved deep into pit firing or raku or gas firing in reduction and all of these other things that I'm very excited to jump into someday.
I found out about you through Round the Mountain Artisan.
Yes. They are a wonderful organization, and they do a lot for the artists in Southwest Virginia, specifically the 13 counties of Southwest Virginia. They've done a lot for me personally. The very first show I ever went to was Blacksburg Steppin' Out, and it was kind of showing my pottery to the world. It was very scary and exciting, and I had a number of people who came up and said, "Oh, are you a juried member of Round the Mountain?" I said, no. And in doing that, and so of course then I investigated everything and decided to try to become a juried member. And I discovered that Round the Mountain, in being a juried member, it has lent me a certain amount of visibility and validation that other people say, "Oh, okay, yes, you're an artist." It also gave me the experience of learning how to go through the jury process. This is something that as artists we have to do all the time, and to have that be my first real jury experience, it was a comfortable, safe space to do that. That then has allowed me to move on to all sorts of other places and feel comfortable doing that.
So what does that mean, going through the jury process as an artist?
Basically, you have to submit work. Sometimes it's just pictures of work. Sometimes it's real pieces. And in the case of Round the Mountain, you submit 5 different pieces to show as examples of your work. And then you leave them there, and then artists that you don't know come in and grade your pieces, which is a little daunting.
Yes,
right?
It reminds me of school days here. Yes.
And then they decide whether or not your work is of the quality and type that they are looking for whatever it is. In this case, you are providing a piece of high quality art. That's it.
Thank you for explaining that. Yeah. I know I go to Heartwood quite a bit and just browse and look at all the art there. And I was talking to a couple of local artists, and they said it's a big deal to get your art even showcased there.
Yes,
so that's how the process works.
It absolutely is, and that is how the process works. And so Round the Mountain, which is a slightly separate organization from Heartwood, Round the Mountain says, okay, these are our juried members and these are their pieces, and then the people from Heartwood take a look and they say, oh yes, we like this and we like this and we like this. You have to get through that first hurdle of being juried into Round the Mountain before you can even begin to have your work at Heartwood.
You have a wonderful Facebook page. Round the Mountain also has a great Facebook page. We'll put all those links so that people can learn more and support local artists. We have so many incredible local artists.
We have a plethora of amazing artists in this region, and who are doing things that you don't see a lot of other places. And I've been to a lot of those other places, and it's really, really phenomenal to get to hang out with these people who are making amazing things.
Do you think part of it is the area that we live in, that it's an inspiration maybe for artists?
I think there's certainly that. I also think that the region that we live in has people who have lived here for generations, and that you don't see that in a lot of other places in the country. So, they've learned how to do this from grandpa, who learned from his grandpa, who learned from his grandpa, and they've all lived in the same piece of land for all this time. They're still harvesting the same wood, or they're whatever it is that they're using for their art. And I think that really adds something to what's being created in this region specifically.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open it.
Okay.
We were talking about surprises earlier and how much I absolutely love surprises. So thank you for bringing this. Yeah. Oh, the bag's heavy, Rick. I kind of am clumsy too.
Oh, that's all right. I used to say that I was a bull in a china shop.
Oh my gosh.
So that is one of my travel mugs, and that's one of my best sellers is my travel mugs. And they are dishwasher and microwave friendly. That obviously is using one of my glazes. That's one of my new glazes this year. It's a lovely kind of I call it sea foam. And the whole so hopefully that will allow you to travel with coffee as needed.
It's beautiful. You probably walked in and you're like, oh, this is the perfect gift, because I have my travel mug from the discount store, and it had some words on it that have actually started rubbing off. So I really appreciate this. It's absolutely beautiful. I love the colors too.
Thank you. And on the inside, if you take the lid off the top, you'll see that on the inside there are actually some instructions for how to use and maintain your Happy Heart Moss pottery.
And it's got the beautiful green color inside too, and you have your sweet little logo. How did you come up with the logo?
The logo, my wife actually designed that. She and it's a sheep, and we raise sheep. We raise sheep and pigs and chickens and cows and turkeys for the time being, and so we'll always probably have sheep, and so it felt very appropriate. Sheep and chickens.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much. That is so thoughtful. We're going to take some pictures during the news break, and we'll take some pictures of this too so that our listeners can be able to see that. Isn't that beautiful, Rick?
That is. I think that's mine.
No. I mean, I might share coffee with you.
I'm pretty sure that's mine.
I don't know. I don't know if I want to
Next time I come, I'll have to bring an extra one.
Well, if you don't mind, give us your website, your contact information again, this event that's coming up.
Absolutely. My website is heartmosspottery.com, and you can also find us at Heart Moss Pottery on Facebook and Pottery Heart Moss on Instagram, and all of the information for the Open Studio, which is June 30th. It's the Saturday before 4th of July. All of that is listed on the website.
Thank you so much for being here. This is absolutely beautiful. So special. It's nice to meet you finally in person. Come back anytime. We'd love to have you.
Yay.
I'm going to go wash up my mug and fill it with coffee. And we'll be back here in just a few minutes after the top of the hour. This is your host, Kristi Slaughter, on SuperTalk Saturday Mornings, WFHG.